The Baldwin County Public School System, considered one of the finest educational environments in the entire state of Alabama, has a history beginning in the latter part of the 18th century, when, as records indicate, Alabama's first public schoolhouse was built in the North Baldwin County community of Tensas in 1799. And at that time, nearly 10 years prior to Baldwin being organized as a county, the area remained geographically expanse. Agriculture served as king, and family farms dotted every section of the county. And in this era of extremely limited highway systems, individual communities built their own respective public schoolhouses, with the Board of Education supplying teachers to provide instruction. In the early part of the 20th century, the Baldwin County Public School System boasted over 80 separate school districts, each with their own individual public schoolhouse. And as time progressed, marked with improvements in transportation and engineering, numerous school districts were consolidated into nearby areas, leaving us today with very few of the original and historic public schoolhouses which distinguished Baldwin County, beginning in 1799, as the birthplace of Alabama's first public schoolhouse. This documentary, commissioned by the Honorable County Commissioners of Baldwin County and honorable members of the Baldwin County Board of Education, seeks to illuminate these few remaining and historic original public schoolhouses in an effort to pay tribute to one of the finest public school systems in Alabama. Located on the eastern shore, the Point Clear School remained an important landmark in this expanse unincorporated community during its tenure as an educational institution in Baldwin County. From 1913 to 1917, Principal Naomi Rogers provided leadership for what was at that time a small three-room school. Students gave regular performances to be enjoyed by all those in and around the community at the old Point Clear Hotel, where tables served as substitutes for the stage. Mrs. Leona Stubblefield, a teacher at the school, remembers when they were able to buy heaters for the school after the students conducted fundraisers. To help the school provide arts education as well as athletic activities, many in the community donated their time and skills to teach the school's pupils music and sports. Those who attended or taught at the Point Clear School spoke of it with very fond memories. Miss Leona Stubblefield recalls the memories of her years spent at the Point Clear School as simply sweet.
Point Clear, standard school construction, 1927 bond issue. Used as an elementary school, closed early on, consolidated with Fairhope, and then it was used for multiple purposes, multiple school purposes, and multiple community purposes. It was even rented out, and the auditorium was the original home of Emperor Clock Company that later moved on over to Foley. That clock company was started by a Fairhope man in the auditorium of the old Point Clear School. Anytime we had a shortage of classrooms somewhere in the area, there's Point Clear. We always had that to fall back on. If there was a fire, we could go to Point Clear. If the area vocational school at Robertsdale didn't get finished, go to Point Clear. It was even used as the school for special needs children. One time it was the county school for special needs children. And we bused them from all over Baldwin County there, even from Bamanette.
The Point Clear School is a beautiful red brick building that was located in Point Clear to combine several of the schools of the area in 1924. Point Clear actually had a frame building that served the children in that area prior to the building built in 1924. The building was built following the state-approved plans with the central entranceway and a beautiful auditorium in the center with classroom wings to the right and left. The building, for most of its life, served students in grades 1 through 8, with a very impressive graduation ceremony held each year at the Grand Hotel.
My name is Pam Pittman Turner. I was a student at Point Clear School in first grade in 1949, and then the next year as well. My teacher was Mrs. Wilson, Miss Edna Wilson. And a long time we thought she was old as dirt, but we loved her. She had white hair that just sort of fitted in a bun, and I felt like if I touched it, it would feel like cotton or cotton candy. It was just real flowy. She wore little round glasses and was always serious. I can't remember her smiling, but we always felt like she was businesslike, but she cared about us. First and second grade were in the same class. We had the little wooden desk that fit right behind each other like you see on Little House on the Prairie. And the first grade was on one side and the second grade students on the other. And I remember I talked too much. And she would take me from the first grade side over to the second grade side when it was their turn to read and the others were doing seat work. So I just sort of shouted her a good bit. And then the next grade, then Mrs. Yenny was Miss Pearl Nelson was the teacher for third grade and fourth grade, and I had Miss Nelson. In fact, Miss Wilson sent me to her the next year. She was anxious for me to go. And I still talked too much, and my friend Ethel Bush was there with me as well. We had a linoleum rug in the middle of the floor that had cartoon characters or nursery rhyme characters around the edge of the rug. And we would sit on those characters. And Ethel and I always sat together on a particular character. And Ms. Nelson called my mother to come talk to her one day about my talking in class too much. And Mother came home and Daddy said, well, how did it go? And I heard, and I don't know if they thought I was listening or not, but Mother said, well, she and Ethel are talking too much. And Daddy said, well, why doesn't Miss Nelson separate them? And she said, well, I asked her that, and Miss Nelson said, oh, it would break their hearts. So life went on. We had a great time out on the playground. We always had teams, and Ethel was kind of a ringleader of one and I of another, and we'd have wars against each other. And we swept pine straw to make the boundaries of the forts. Occasionally we played house, but it was mostly war, I think. And one of the most fun things was the slide. No, we did have a slide too, I believe, but the seesaws. And you would all stand on one side of the seesaw, and everybody would run to the other end except the last person, who would be bounced up in the air. And occasionally there was fallout from that with bloody noses, but we didn't care. Lots of sand spurs around that playground, which was sandy on the ground, with yaupon bushes and shrubbery that you could hide in for wars. And students would show off every now and then, putting sand spurs in their mouth, and we had a couple of accidents with that. But it was free-for-all at recess, at play yard. We didn't have PE teachers organizing games, but we could organize them pretty well. I should have brought my reading book. I still have the Dick and Jane little paperback reader. We had a great cafeteria. I think when I was there, Zelda was remembering bringing lunches, and I can remember doing both, but I loved eating in the cafeteria. We had those navy beans with a little ham hock in there and cornbread. And the German ladies, I believe it was, were the cooks. The food was great. And then after that, we would take the proverbial trip by the bathroom, and you could see over the door and under the door, and we were kind of silly. And one day, I couldn't get out of the bathroom. I don't remember why that was. But the students thought it was really funny, and they didn't tell Miss Nelson, it was in the third grade, that I was there for a while, but pretty soon she discovered me, and I was very embarrassed, and I don't think I was the ringleader that afternoon. I think I was probably pretty quiet and a proper little girl. One of the big treats that I can remember were the activities that we had in the cafeteria on stage. We had a stage there, and we would put on performances for patriotic things. I remember doing a baton number on the stage with a red cape that my mother had made me, and the music was Stars and Stripes Forever. Maybe it was Veterans Day. but the parents came to watch, and we all giggled behind the screen and had a good time behind the curtain.
I went through school there, first grade through the sixth. Ms. Wilson was my first teacher. I remember her better than any of them. And naturally there wasn't a whole lot of us at the school, so we were all very close to each other, students. And we enjoyed being there, and we had to walk to school. And a lot of times we'd get to school before they opened the school, so we would have a basketball and get out there and play basketball until the bell rung. And some of the boys teased me a lot because I was short, and they used to hurt my feelings. And then I was left-handed, so I couldn't stand to be teased, so I learned to eat and write with my right hand. And we just had a lot of fun there, you know, and we did make it through Point Clear and came to Fairhope. We used to, like after school, they used our auditorium for like different things, you know, for entertainment, and it was usually in the evenings, and parents and all were invited to come, and that kept us kind of, you know, up to date and enjoying everything. And even, I can't remember the name of the dance that we did a lot. It was the country dance anyway, and I can't even remember the name of it now. But, and like I say, we were all very close and just got along fine. When it was getting close to school being closed, my girlfriend and I were so upset about it, we'd cry because we didn't want school to close. I can remember that very well, because we really liked being in school, you know. And I think too, we figured we weren't going to be as close seeing each other when school was closed too, so. But, oh, maybe you'd like to hear this. One of my other girlfriends, I don't know how it was that we were going to her place and we were going to walk, and it was doing a break or something, and we had to walk from school around down to the highway because they lived right down from the highway, and on Scenic 98 it is now, but it wasn't no Scenic 98 back then. But anyway, we went to her house and to pick up papers or something, and then I don't know why we decided we wanted to look like we'd been crying, so we got this oh goodness, this stuff that they put in your nose, you know, for colds and such, and I can't remember the name of it now. But anyway, we'd put it around close to our eyes and looked like we were crying. So when we got back to school, everybody wanted to know why we were crying. So just foolish, silly mess. So anyway, but that's one of the things I can remember.
Most people that attended Point Clear School have fond memories of a beautiful little one-room library that was a separate building on the campus. However, the history of the library at Point Clear is even more remarkable. The library was actually the smallest public library in the United States for a while, and it served Point Clear community from the early 1900s until 1950. At that time, it stood next to Zundel's store and the post office on Highway 98 in Point Clear. Upon its closing, it was moved to the Point Clear School campus, where it served that school as a library for those students that were there. As the school system grew and the school grew, the library was no longer used and it fell into disrepair. And thankfully, a local family came to the rescue of the building, and it is preserved today by a private resident in Baldwin County.
I went to Point Clear School in 1938 or 39 for 1 year. My teacher was Miss Wilson. I remember more about her at Point Clear than anything else. After that, the school bus started running on Greeno Road, which is Highway 98 now. I caught the bus, started coming to Fairhope in the 2nd grade. And the 2nd grade was on the south end of the school building. I worked all the way around my senior year here, 12th grade. It's one door down where we're at now. Coming to Fairhope was like coming from daylight to dark. Point Clear was a small family school, was real nice, everybody knew each other. I really hated to leave, but then when I got to Fairhope, they was all the same way. We were a small class. Everybody was like brothers and sisters. We all just joined in, and we went all the way from the 2nd grade through the 12th grade together. And we always loved each other like brothers and sisters, and we're still doing that today. We still meet today. Most of our class meet every other month, and every 5 years we still meet. And very few classes does that. The highlights of school was coming to school, not having to work. I love school because when we grew up, everything in Baldwin County there was farming. You got off the bus, you started working, you worked till dark, and you get up in the morning and go work before you come to school. So the reason I love school the most is I got out of work, I tell my daddy, and he always wanted to whip me for it. He said, "You're supposed to go to school to learn, boy." I said, "Well, I had more fun there too, but it was a whole lot of fun in school, and it wasn't working for you." So anyhow, I was the first one of 6 boys to graduate from high school. All the rest of them had to drop out in 9th, 10th, 11th grade. My oldest brother dropped out in the 12th grade to go to World War II. So I was the first one to graduate out of the family, and it was hard back in those days because your mother and daddy both only had a 1st to 6th grade education, and my mother had a 6th grade education, my daddy had an 8th. They knew right from wrong and how to raise you, and that's about it.
My days at Point Clear School were from 1945 through 1951, 1st through 6th grade. We always enjoyed Point Clear School as we had to walk a mile on dirt roads to get to school. And when we were at school, we had 3 classes to 1 room. Miss Edna Wilson taught us 1st through 3rd grade. And then eventually, after several years there, we had no cafeteria. We had to bring our lunch. And then Miss Mac Phillips started making soup for us 1 day a week on Fridays. We would have soup. She would bring. We had our own bowls there, and we would buy a soup for 10 cents a bowl on every Friday. And we had lots of fun there, playing and running and swinging and all kinds of things, activities. I had to whip a boy one time at school. I couldn't catch him, but when I got him, I worked him over good with a croquet bat. Not very ladylike. But we did have a good time.
I started school in 1932 in Point Clear. And of course, I went there for 6 years. And one of the things that I probably remember the most is the old round wood-burning stove that you had to get out there in the morning and get started before you had any heat in the room. And of course, Miss Edna Wilson taught us that. And it seems like a Mrs. Garrett was in the upper grades when I got into from the 4th on up, but I don't remember for sure. When we were in school there, everybody used to make a pea shooter out of rolling paper up and gluing it. So of course I had to be like everybody else and make one, but I saw a sand spur on somebody's thing, and I picked it up and put it in and going to blow it, and I sucked, and when I did, it ended up in my throat. So I ended up in Mobile getting a sand spur taken out of my throat.
My days at Point Clear School were the 5th and the 6th grade, and we had a great time. We had a good teacher, Ms. Stapleton, and we used to do the Virginia reel. at least once or twice a week, and we did some other dances. And what else did we do? Oh, and we had a pump out in the back to pump water, to drink, and we had our own cups. And we also had an outhouse. We did not have a bathroom in the school. And we all had fun, and there was 3 grades, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And while we were doing, in the 5th grade, while we were doing some things, then the 6th grade would be doing their lessons, and the same with the 4th. And that's just about all I can remember about it. We had a good time, we played at recess, and like some of the other people said, there was lots of sand spurs. One thing, I kissed a boy at the pump and got punished for it. At the time, he was my boyfriend, I thought, 10 years old. I don't remember the punishment, but I got it. When we had to walk to school, and there were a lot of cockleburs on the side of the road. And one afternoon or morning, I don't remember, one girl we had a fight with on the way to school, going home, and she put cockleburs in her hair. And that, other than learning something, that was quite an experience going to that small school.
We moved here in 1940. We came from a little town, Greenville, Alabama. Started 4th grade at Point Clear School. Mrs. Wilson taught 1, 2, and 3. 4th, 5th, and 6th was taught by Miss Pearl Nelson, Miss Sarah Yenny. The best things I can remember about starting 4th grade, we always started out with the Lord's Prayer. That was the first thing we had to do. Then we went with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Then we started in our little books, which I really enjoyed, was Jack and Jill, and Dick, Jane, and Spot. And I thought those 3 characters in that book was just the most wonderful thing I had ever read, the story. Then we had like little dances that the teachers took us into the big auditorium and taught us to do the Virginia Reel. And a little bit later on in the years, a little bit of square dancing, which we all learned to do also. My worst part was when I went into 6th grade, which the 4th, 5th, and 6th was all in one room. The teacher would have to take the classes one at a time. I remember the rationing stamps came out. We had to borrow my grandmother and grandfather's rationing stamps because we would wear our shoes out so fast. And there were so many sand spurs in the yard where we would go to play, and we would get those all in our feet. And most of the time the sand was so hot, we'd go over to the pump, which you could pump the water and wash your feet and cool them off from where the sand spurs had got in your feet. Then we used to help when we would spend the night with our grandmother and grandfather, which lived on Courtney Hill. The school buses had begun to run, and I remember 3 or 4 times of riding that school bus, and it would be raining and you couldn't get up that hill. We would all have to get off that school bus and push that school bus up the hill to get to school. Then Miss Wilson and them would have towels there to dry all of us off one at a time at the pump, where you'd pump all this water. We'd do it one at a time. Anyway, we'd find it with all of us off the school bus, pushing it up this hill to get it to the schoolhouse to get off. And that was a lot of fun, really, days for us, but I enjoyed that. Then after I left 6th grade, we went into Fairhope High School, which I really enjoyed. But like Clarence said, it was a lot different because we came from an area where we had to work in the fields and help out with our families, providing with groceries and things.
We
moved from Upper Alabama, which was like Greenville, Alabama, and I was 6 years old when my folks moved me to Point Clear. And we lived on Confederate Rest Road, and there used to be a path there through the woods where we could just run through the woods to the school, to the Point Clear school. And I remember Miss Sarah Yenny when I believe I was in the first grade, and some of the other teachers, the ones that they had mentioned, Mrs. Wilson, I remember them, but I remember Sarah Yenny the most. She was like one of my favorite teachers, and even after she retired and I came back home, I would go see her until she passed away, you know, because and some of the things I remember about the school is we had a game called volleyball. No, wall ball. It was wall ball. And we had a basketball, and we would stand outside and whip the ball around us and hit the wall, you know. And we had some points that we would make, but I forgot the game. Then there was another game similar to the rug you have here, where we would take a piece of glass and 3 or 4 would be on one side and 3 or 4 on the other side, and we would kick the glass and it would hit a square, and we had the squares, I think they were numbered, and that was a lot of fun in the school. And we used to, my mom used to pack our lunches, you know, and in little brown bags, and behind the classroom, kind of a little cubby hole where we'd hang our clothes and stuff, there was a shelf where everybody would put their lunches, and sometimes we'd get the wrong lunch, which was kind of funny because we sometimes didn't know what she had packed in our bags, you know. And that was kind of fun because sometimes people would get the wrong one and then start looking through their bag and they'd have somebody else's, and the teacher just said, go ahead and eat that, you know. So we had a lot of fun about that. And the square dances that the school had on the weekends was a lot of fun because I like to dance. And my dad taught me how to do the Charleston and some of the dances in the back, you know, in the auditorium. And then we'd have plays, you know, like on Easter time and at Christmas time. And at Christmas time, it was wonderful because I always wanted to be the angel. And Mother would take and make me an all-white dress, you know, and then she'd take coat hangers and make the wings, you know, to go on the back, and she'd make the little tiara to go on my head, you know, which it was nice. And then at Easter time we would have little performances, which was nice. But I liked to be the one in the angel at Christmas. And then there came a time when some of the mothers would decided to come to the school and make dinners for us. And Carolyn Mack Phillips, she had 2 children. Well, actually, I remember Joe going to school there, her oldest son. I don't know if the younger one, I can't remember if he went there or not. But she would come to the school, and they had this big old pot, and she had like an electric hot plate, and she would open these cans of Campbell's soup, and it would be the one with the alphabets in it. And I just loved that soup. I'd be back there helping her open it up to heat it for us at lunch, you know, with crackers. And she furnished this herself. Nobody paid her, you know, to do this, and that was a lot of fun. And the halls was big in the school, I can remember, and we had back houses. And a lot of the kids the school was up high enough that kids would go under the school and hide. So the teacher would have to make them all come out from under the school. And let's see, what else was it that I enjoyed there? Oh, and one time they had a art contest, and I was in that, and several of us did some pictures, and I did a picture of Mickey Mouse. And Ernest Langham was the one that was sponsoring it, and he was going to give the one that won $10 or $15, and I won the contest, and that was exciting. Well, at Point Clear, Joe kind of was jealous of me in my artwork, so he took a pencil and scribbled the pencil across one of my art papers, and hit him in the head with a pair of scissors, which I shouldn't have did it. I was young. And of course, I know he still has a scar on his forehead. His mother was pretty upset, but she didn't do anything. And he was always trying to pull pranks on me. And so one time we had these little peppers, the little round peppers, and I covered them with chocolate, and he thought they were chocolate-covered raisins or peanuts, and I gave him a handful of those. And he burned his tongue in his mouth. You know, I don't even know if he remembers it or not.
The area vocational school at Robertsdale was not finished when the school year began. And we had to find vacant space to put it. And the only vacant space we could find was halfway across the county at Point Clear. So we set that up as the area vocational school. Now, all of the area vocational school teachers were new, and being artisans in their trades, they really hadn't had any experience as teachers. They had great experience at what they were doing, what they were teaching. For instance, automotive mechanics, but no experience at all in teaching kids. But that particular teacher was also a school bus driver at Robertsdale, and it was his duty, it fell as his duty, to transport his children over to Point Clear during the course of the half day that was devoted to vocational pursuits, and to bring them back at the right time. And this was an afternoon class. Now, we didn't have any books, we didn't have any tools, we didn't have anything to assist that teacher at the time. We were just getting started. So what we had was an inexperienced teacher, a group of kids, and a building that had nothing, not even a cafeteria in it. They had to eat at the parent school and go to that particular school. And 3 weeks into the school year, this particular teacher, school bus driver, had run out of soap. He just, his patience was taxed to the very limits to do his job. Now, he'd been a school bus driver in a lot of years, and in those years, we had to cross a lot of railroad tracks. And the state taught you that the proper way to cross a railroad track is to find a responsible student to come to a stop a full 15 feet before you come to the railroad track, put out that student, have the student walk the track. That was called walking the track. And he was to look down the track both ways, and he was to signal the school bus driver that it was safe to come. And then he was to trot more than a school bus length down the road and wait for the bus to come. Then it was the school bus driver's duty to exercise independent judgment. He was supposed to do his looking to the right and to his left, then proceed across and pick up the child. Now, this did two things. It made the school bus driver stop, and it provided witnesses that he had actually stopped. And then it gave him an extra pair of eyes on that thing. Well, there was a young boy that lived north of Loxley, who eventually came to be a member of this particular school bus driver, teacher, mechanics teacher's class, and his name was Richard. And Richard was an experienced track walker, but he was walking a track that was rarely traveled. And in the course of his vast experience, Richard had never actually seen a train. He had just automatically gone out there, he had looked, did his looking. And now, when we transferred over to this other, Richard being an experienced track walker and working for his regular morning school bus driver where he had been used to perform, again, he had to perform this service on the way home. Well, on this particular afternoon, one hot September afternoon, about 3 weeks into the school year, when everybody's temper was they had just reached the absolute limit because they didn't have any teaching materials. And when Richard got out at Robertsdale on his way back to Robertsdale School, when he got out and crossed the tracks for the first time in his life, a locomotive appeared on the scene, and Richard panicked. Instead of signaling to his school bus driver, he ran down the tracks toward the train, waving to stop the train. The conductor of the train looked down the tracks, and he sees a yellow school bus. He doesn't know whether it's actually on the tracks or not, and he sees this student frantically waving down. So he panics too, and he put on his brakes, and he comes squealing up, and he comes to a stop. And with that, Richard calmly turns his back on the train and wriggling motions the school bus to cross in front of it. Well, the school bus driver had previously lost his cool, and he was shouting to "No, Richard, no, no, no!" And the kids took it up, "Go, Richard, go, go!" The locomotive engineer, he lost his cool too. And he fell out of his train, and he came up to the school bus, and he said things to the school bus driver that he didn't learn in Sunday school. The poor school bus driver, when he eventually got over to Robertsdale High School, went in to report the whole business to the school principal. And the school principal happened to have a tape recorder handy, and he taped the school bus driver's account of this affair. Later, almost a year later, I had told this story to the state transportation supervisor, and that fall at the meeting in Tuscaloosa, he asked me to tell this story. And I told my story to all of the state school bus supervisors. One of them took the story to the national meeting of transportation supervisors, the state supervisors in Washington, D.C. And later on, at a meeting in Denver, Colorado, of the National Association of School Business Administrators, I happened to be present. And we had a seminar on school transportation. And one of the Washington transportation man told this story at a meeting in which I was present. So the story went all over the United States.